and then you open up the Northern Distribution Network, and everyone sees all of a sudden, and hears on the news that now the West in America is coming back, and the perception among the people I've met since they opened up the Northern Distribution Network was that this great power, which we had looked upon as our champion to raise our human rights, our rights issues, and had been true certainly during the 1990s, had suddenly sold out entirely because security in Afghanistan was the priority. So for all their lofty ideals and talk, when it came down to security, which was not necessarily priority on Central Asian security, but a priority on American and Western security, that they were willing to ignore some of the practices, the heinous practices of their own governments for political expediency and security in Central Asia. I talked to people in the Fergana Valley a lot after the Northern Distribution Network started again, and that's exactly what they told me. We had this idea that America was here, they would help us, that if we complained to the American government and they heard our voice, they would complain to our government and we would get some kind of change. And the attitude after America returned to Uzbekistan was that we had sold them out.
Could I also add that I think one of the difficulties here is that we sometimes aggregate a country to as though it were a single actor, where, of course, what we've often seen in what might be described as Western foreign policy towards Central Asia are the competing agendas and priorities of different agencies within the same government, or obviously with charities and non-governmental organizations as well. So the classic example after Andijan would be the withdrawal of State Department funding and support, but which becomes balanced by the Defense Department making that up because they were wanting to maintain that relationship. And often we can look at different actions by different agencies of the same government, or even by actions and statements by protest groups or NGOs or businesses. If we put them all together, we can easily observe hypocrisy and double standards. If we disaggregate them, we can understand the more complex workings of governments and interagency rivalries that characterize even authoritarian regimes.
It is really, really an interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So coming to an end, there are a few more points that we have to discuss. So with this, Dr. Nick, maybe you can answer this question. So is there anything West can learn from its approach towards Central Asia going forward?
I think there are two things we can learn. I think the first thing we can learn is a humility. Central Asian elites and ordinary populations, like any of us on Earth, balk at being told what to do by people who have a sense of superiority. Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan have shown they are no one's pawns. They are their own actors, and we need to respect that. But I think the second thing is that we can only do so much. There's an assumption that it's our job to create democracy, etc. We can't do that. But the third thing the most important thing I would take away is that we need to put our own house in order. Many of the problems of Central Asia, corruption, descent into violence, etc., have not been produced by the West, but they've been facilitated by the architectures of international finance that we've created. Best way to help reduce corruption in these countries would be to put our own house in order and sort out the international financial system first.
Mm-hmm. In totality, what does the past 2.5 decades tell us about future of the region, where it is headed? Dr. Grech and then Bruce, please, final points.
Well, I think that it's really important for people in Central Asia, my colleagues that I interact with regularly, to be realistic about their region. It is a mistake for people to think that the role of the United States is to somehow bring a new form of government to Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan that will supplant the previous 25 years and create a system very much like the Western system, which will function there. Unfortunately, some people expect that in Central Asia. That was never the intention. It was never a statement of Western intentions. It's an expectation that was created in the region, created and I think fueled by people who thought that America would take control of the region. Never the intention of the United States, and it will never take place. What is taking place in the region is the influence of other international actors. In particular, what we've all witnessed, what we've all seen in the last few years is the increasing influence of China. That may be, in the long run, a very benign influence that will add to the economic development and the social development in the region. The other influence that we see, of course, is from Russia. The effort to reestablish basically the Soviet perimeter of control in the region. I've heard people from the CSTO publicly state that Kyrgyzstan is their area of responsibility, meaning that they are responsible, the CSTO is responsible for the protection of Kyrgyzstan, and that Kyrgyzstan should not play a role with other partners in other alliances around the world. I think that's very unfortunate because it diminishes the national sovereignty of Kyrgyzstan. It makes it very difficult for them to make their own decisions because they will be forced into decisions. So I see the rise, actually, of the Asian century as playing a very important, perhaps a determining role for Central Asia in the 25 years that we look ahead.
Bruce? The big wild card here is just how much effort is Russia willing to put into keeping its control over the area. Otherwise, if you look at most of Central Asia's strong partners now, they are all in Asia. I think when the U.S. and the West decides they're going to re-engage with Central Asia, and they will at some time or another, we're in the process of disengaging from Afghanistan, and that just kind of radiates outward to some of the other countries that we've been struck new forms of alliances with since the Afghanistan campaign started, but we will re-engage with Central Asia one time, and the focus the next time has got to be on just a couple of basic things that you really want to change. The problem, and we see it in Afghanistan now, is that they're like, we're here to help you, and here's a list of 100 or 200 things that you need to do to change your society to get everything going forward again, and it's too much. And I think that was one of the problems that we had in Central Asia. We got all our NGOs in there, and it was democracy, and it was respect for this group's rights and that group's rights and everything. And I think it was just too much for them to digest all that much. And so the next time we come around and start talking to them, we got to pick a couple of areas that we really want to start with as building blocks and say these are where we want our common interests to be located. And I would suggest that freedom of speech would be the one that they should really concentrate on, because everything kind of flows out of that. These cultures never had this stuff before, and you can't expect everyone to turn around and in 5 or 10 years model their system on Western systems and values.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruce Pannier, editor of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Central Asia blog, Kishlak Owazi. Also, big thanks goes to Dr. Grigory Glessin, professor at the Marshall European Center for Security Studies, and Dr. Nick Miguran, professor at the University of Newcastle. Thank you very much for taking time and joining Majlis today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is from me, Mohammed Tahir, host of the Majlis, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Central Asia podcast. Until next week, bye-bye.